Hi, everybody, it's Ron, and we're here for another day of looking at the headlines and trying to add some context and/or commentary on what's going on in this crazy world. Let's get right to it. Yeah, here we have, you see that the Trump page is playing up all these articles about issues and problems with both the Biden and Trump campaigns. They're not really problems because they're both the front runners, but the party insiders in the background would like to replace both Biden and Trump with maybe more acceptable candidates who either aren't so senile in terms of Biden or loose cannons or even dangerous in terms of Trump. And here we have Liz Cheney, who apparently weighing a third-party run. This is the daughter of the former vice president under George W. Bush, Dick Cheney. At the time of the George W. Bush's presidency, Cheney was, along with Bush, I suppose, portrayed by the media as the most evil right-wing devil that there possibly was, callous and starting and engaging in foreign wars. But since Trump came to power, Liz Cheney and I guess that whole political family have become Donald Trump's major detractors. So they are reported on with a little more deference now than they used to be. And here's an idea that possibly she would want to run as a third-party candidate to either win or disadvantage Trump. Seems unlikely because that Cheney family has a sort of cold air about them. I don't see them as national ticket winners. I mean, Cheney was only on the vice presidential ticket. Dick Cheney, the father, was only on the vice presidential ticket. I don't know, it's kind of a holder space. He didn't even have any aspirations to run for president afterwards. He's an old scowling man. The family are sort of scowling as well, and Liz Cheney was already kind of thrown out of her office by Trump upstarts in the elections when she was part of Congress. So that's it does show that there is some activity in the back rooms to push Trump out of the picture. Or there may be another reason, and the reason we're hearing all of these kind of puff piece articles on Liz Cheney is she has a book, and it's a #1 bestseller. Oath and Honor, a Memoir and a Warning. And of course, she's warning through this book that Trump is a dictator and they cannot allow him to be elected again. And by the way, I've got a book too. This is a perfect way to stick in my little advertisement here. This is my novel of life in the concrete metropolis of Bangkok. These are young people, both Thais and non-Thais, foreigners who've come to Bangkok to work. Their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations in an ever-changing, fantastical city and land. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It'd be great if you want to read it. And if you do, let me know what you think. So let's keep going here. Of course, we have an FBI director, USA facing highest risk of terror attack in years. This has to do with the Israel-Hamas situation, the war in the Middle East. Certain sexual harassment claims. I think, like most people, I'm kind of bored of that. I'm not sure that should be front page news. What else do we have here? Here's more warnings against Trump. This article is trying to tell us that Biden has been a lot tougher on China and has a very strong foreign policy. or I guess Trump didn't. But the reality is that both Trump and Biden turned up the screws on China, tightening trade sanctions on various things. So I'm not sure I would make a judgment that one is definitely Biden or Trump has been stronger on China. And this is essentially an editorial piece, but it's not listed as an editorial piece. What I would say is the reason China would want Trump to win is simply the fact that Trump is less likely to want to be engaged in more foreign wars. You know, he's spoken out against the involvement of the U.S. in Ukraine, and there's lots of questions that have been raised about the U.S. involvement in the Middle East. So certainly this would make China more bold in flexing its muscles in the South China Seas. And we have here, suppose this old trend of, see, the conspiracy theory, and I'm not even sure if you're allowed to say this on YouTube, but the idea is why is there unprecedented levels of immigration that are being allowed? Why do the Democrats want it and the Republicans want stronger borders? And the conspiracy theory, at least, is that, you're creating new population growth to support one party or the other. And I remember people talking about this both on the right and the left all the way back in the 80s. And then, as is now, you find especially the Hispanic voter, the people Central America, Mexican, and Central America, the immigrants coming from those countries often end up being more conservative or right-leaning than left-leaning. So I don't know where that leaves all the conspiracy theories on this issue. But again, I've noticed that, people, you're not allowed to speak about these things in immigration at all. And in some circles, you're not allowed to say illegal immigrant because it's not illegal, shouldn't be illegal for an economic migrant to enter another country, but I don't know. If you're an American, you can try illegally entering other countries and see if they have the same forbearance the U.S. does to foreigners. Okay. Gold bars found in Senator Menendez's homes, linked to armed robbery. This is a fascinating thing. This senator has gotten in trouble for all kinds of malfeasance and things, and they're digging into him. I don't think you would want to get into politics unless you were clean as a bean. And even then, they'd probably be able to find something on you. I don't know why, if you had any possible criminal alleged past, that you would dare stick your toe into politics. Netanyahu fighting two wars may not win either. This is both the war in the Middle East and the legal chain, the court's decisions that are being brought against him. Obviously, they're trying to get rid of him. They were trying to change the way the balance of powers were in the Israeli government, and many leaders in society there were calling against it. That was in all the months leading up before the new Hamas-Israeli war. And of course, in these cases, like I was saying, that it's easy to get a case brought up against somebody you don't like in power and through some mechanism get him out of power. And that's obviously what's happening with Netanyahu right now, justly or unjustly, depending on your point of view. And the other aspect is even bringing up the idea that Israel could win the war against Hamas. All these Palestinian-related troubles have been going on for many decades. There's no doubt that it's not going to be ended in this circumstance. I mean, the best they could do is perhaps eject Hamas from Gaza Strip, where they have controlled it since they took it over in a coup in, I believe, 2007. So that situation there, and we've talked about this before, there's too many other powers in the regions who have their own reasons to want Israel not to make peace with the Palestinians. So the Palestinian issue has been used for other ulterior motives by other powers, and it always messes up any moves to a real lasting peace. So we shouldn't expect it now. This is a right-leaning, obviously, Second Amendment. This is supposed to get you riled up in America because Americans like to own and carry guns and shoot them. So this is a very right-wing thing. So, but it is, here's the president's calls for Jewish genocide do not violate code of conduct. So they were under questioning by, I believe, someone from Congress, and they were trying to pin him down to say that was calling for genocide is against the code of conduct, and they couldn't quite pin him down, and the college presidents were equivocating or trying to have a political middle sort of answer. And then, of course, the Free Beacon, which is a right-leaning paper, plays this up, maybe justly, to show the lack of balance in terms of how these colleges are dealing with calls for violence against some groups as opposed to other groups. Well, we talked about this a few days ago. We got the Supreme Court. From the arguments that they're hearing now, it looks like they might not overturn all this. The way the government can tax unrealized income, it has to do with money that you have outside the country and bringing it in. The government wants a piece of that. The only reason this comes up is the current group of Supreme Court justices have seemed not shy in overturning long set precedent. A lot of them were appointed during Trump's time in office, and they overturned the Roe versus Wade, the judgment that barred states from restricting abortion, and that was a very maybe not surprising thing because people knew that certain groups were working towards this over many decades, but at the Supreme Court level, usually they might be a little bit loath to overturn precedent, especially when it has something to do with rights and liberties of people. So they start to look at other issues that come up, like this tax code thing, and hey, maybe they could get, activists overturn that, and the government suddenly would not be able to get all the money it wants to get in the way it wants to get it. What else do we have here? Anybody over a certain age, the idea that kids in school are handcuffed and sent to the hospital when they misbehave. It's a bizarre, the things we tolerate. And who knows what's behind that. Some people say class sizes have gotten too big, and so kids who would get attention in a smaller class size do not anymore, and it ends up to them going wild and teachers not being able to handle that. That's what behind it. Maybe it's our permissive society. Maybe it's because half the people are being born or claiming they're autistic. Never even heard of that when I was a kid. Then you go back, remember going back to the U.S. in the 1990s, and everybody's autistic. They have whole classes full of them. I said, wow, what happened? And everyone, oh no, it's always been that way. It couldn't have been that way. We never had anything like that. We never heard. They're like, yeah, on this street, this is autistic. All these kids are autistic suddenly. And you find out they really are. Something's happening because it didn't used to be like that. But by the same token, everybody back there in the U.S. has to say, it's always been like this. And people showed, look, in Wikipedia, it just says we're better at diagnosing now. There's a lot of profoundly autistic kids now that appeared. Who knows what it is? I know some people said people are having kids older, and the older sperm from men increases the chance of that. I think there's some missing factor. We got to keep looking. And no, morons, it's not vaccines. Again, the whole reason why people want to believe in all the conspiracy theories about vaccines, it's another whole issue I've talked about in the past. Maybe I'll talk about it again sometime if it comes up in the news, but, you can show your opposition to the current prevailing government or way of thinking or censorship that's in the media without embracing false ideas, just to upset other people and the opposition. What is this? I didn't see this. Who cares? Okay. Record oil production, pushing prices down. I mentioned this several times in the past. It's always worth mentioning now. This is why there is a pivot away from interest in having the U.S. spend hundreds of billions of dollars to protect areas in the Middle East, and even why it's not. It's a question now. Why do we have? Does the U.S. is energy independent now? I think they're the biggest producers in the world, or at least producing more than Russia or Saudi Arabia, because of the magic of fracking, I believe, of all things. There's a whole other debate for you. But because of that, because of in the past the U.S. was dependent on oil, it had to be engaged in the Middle East. Now, I believe it probably still has to be because of world order, because the oil from the Middle East is supporting Japan, China, Europe. It is going to allies and other parts of the world economy, which are now interwoven and interdependent on each other. But still, we have this concept that over time, the engagement that the U.S. feels it needs to have in the Middle East will decrease as the U.S. and other countries will become more energy independent. I don't know why. I've always been fascinated by North Korea. I remember early days of the internet when the North Korean government had some webpage and they put out their little propaganda articles that were bizarre, ridiculous. And I've always been interested in this. So here he is crying, calling on women to have more children. On the other hand, you can be interested in North Korea and kind of laugh at them and have fun joking about them. But someday when they fall and all the reality comes out about what they've been doing, and we know about some of the terrors and atrocities of the regime already, someday it'll be like they're going to be as bad as Hitler, and we might feel sorry for frivolously joking about such terrible realities that must be going on there in that country. I don't know how they can allow this to happen, where just anybody could speak into the computer. These big things, they're run by Microsoft, they're run by Google, and you can create songs using someone else's voice. It just seems like there needs to be some laws against this. Maybe we need to break up Google. Maybe we need to break up Microsoft again, or try. just to allow them to just step upon everybody else's intellectual property rights like that with impunity because they're so big. Yeah, I don't know if you'd ever want to put your trust in Trump, but when you're looking at facing off against giant companies like Microsoft and Google, who, you know, is able to influence government and have an outside influence in government, you might think that someone like Trump, who's a loose cannon and a wild man, might be the person to get these things done. But on the other hand, he has so many unforced errors and is so uncontrollable, doesn't really have an ideology. Maybe he wouldn't get it done, or he most likely would not get it done, or destroy other things while doing it. I've always been interested in subways. You know me and all this mass transit. There's some gigantic, huge project. Like I said, the biggest in Europe, new lines of transport for the Paris metro. How cool. This was one of my favorite things in Paris to see. I went to all the museums, but they have some of these real old stations. I believe this is Art Nouveau style, where they interweave the slightly stylized naturalistic designs of leaves and trees and stems to create this. This is an entrance to one of the old subway stations, so they're going to build a lot more. This is not Art Nouveau. This is present day urban blandness. I wouldn't even call it the brutalism that they have in London, but this is just like as generic as we can be. But now this is something else. Look at that. Think we could have that in New York? Do you think anybody would write on that? I don't know. I don't think so. 23andMe profiles of 6.9 million people hacked. This is this DNA thing where you're supposed to put your DNA in there, and it tells you, you know, every American, every white, super white people like me, we think that, you know, we're part Indian, you know, as Native Americans, that kind of Indian, or we had some foreign prince thing. You know, everybody wants to think, if you're a white person, that you have some little piece of color in you. But I was never interested in this because my parents did their DNA, and it was just all white. It's like all English and I think a tiny bit of German or something. It just as white as you can get, nothing interesting. So I'm always envious of people who say, oh yeah, I've got, you know, 1/4 Moroccan, or, you know, or just something interesting that's just not all white. I don't know why this is interesting to me, but I remember living in Los Angeles in the 1980s. Now, not going to a porn theater, but I remember when there were actual porn theaters in big cities and driving past them. And now that looks like a gross place to be. And I remember driving past the porn theaters and wondering who goes in them. And you'd never see anybody walking by them or going in them. And then sometime during the late 80s, there was a big federal thing, and they shut them all down because they were laundering money, I guess, for the mob, something like that. You see, it's perfect because, you know, the launder money is you got to get it on the books. So you have this theater and no one shows up for the show, but you say, oh yeah, we had 70 paying patrons. Oh yeah, and they bought popcorn or something. And then you book that money as your profit. And there's the money on the books, legal money from your business. And apparently this has been the way it is a lot of places in the world. And many places in many countries that still have sex industries and this sort of thing. It's always a little bit under wraps. And people think, oh, there's big money in sex. I think the prevailing idea is, no, there isn't. And most places where you see sex industries thriving, it's used to launder money. So this is Yikes. The last one. Of course, you wouldn't have any need for this anymore because everything's online. As I say, just look on Instagram. There's a lot of sexy, slutty women on there already. So I don't think anybody needs to go to a place anymore. So that's the news for today. A grab bag of stuff. And I think, we're getting up to the Christmas season. All of this promoting of alternate candidates for Biden and Trump, that will go quiet for a couple weeks because we're going to get in the Christmas season. Nobody watches the news. But once we get maybe past Christmas or right at the New Year, we're going to see the headlines loaded with stuff because it's going to be the last chance to get rid of Trump or Biden, the last chance to replace those candidates with somebody else who might be seen as more acceptable and viable for the party in the long run, and even in the short run, because you never know what's going to happen with this election. Can Biden really, he's old enough, he might not live out being elected next year, which I don't wish that, but that's the case. Of course, if anybody says, well, Trump's just 4 years younger, something like that, has nothing to do with the numerical age. It has to do with, being obviously senile or not. And others people would say, well, Trump, that might be better than Trump being unhinged or uncontrollable. So got my cards here. We got our Art of War cards here today. Picking a card off the top to see if it can tell us something about how to deal with our lives, our business, maybe the whole world. And today, here is our point. Okay, I've never been able to get this to focus correctly. We have target a center of gravity, and I'll just read this so you don't have to see my shaky hand. Target a center of gravity. Pursue or attain an objective your adversary will seek to pursue or recover. Okay. Basis, targeting an essential part of your adversary's disposition challenges the balance of power. This is from The Art of War. Message from a Chinese sage coming to us over the eons to target a center of gravity. So I guess this is, you could force somebody else into taking action to protect their essential area or headquarters. So I guess that makes sense. You have to think how we can deal with that in our lives to maybe manipulate others. So anyway, I've had a cold today. Excuse my voice, and I will see you next time with more headlines.